Hey guys, so let's talk about the life cycle of a component, right? So before even talking about what's a component or what's a life cycle, let's talk about humans, right? So we humans, right? Humans have a life cycle, right? So first they're conceived, then they take birth, then they grow up, they change, they are on their deathbed and they die, right? So similarly, in same way, in React and React Native, there are certain lifecycle methods. And I will not just say React Native. In general, if you see any UI, right, any modern UI, right, let it be written on Kotlin or maybe on Swift or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. The concept is there, right? Something is about to be created, something gets created, then something will be destroyed, something is destroyed, right? So you want to perform bunch of actions on those events, right? Okay, so that's the life cycle, right? What is a component? Since we have been seeing a lot of components, right, like view component, text input, buttons, right? So basically, how I see a component is a piece of a UI which lays the building block of something bigger, right? And now the question is, how small can a component be, right? So a view is the smallest unit of a component, right? Is the building block, right? But you can create a little bit complicated view, and that complicated view can become the building block of something even more complex, right? So the definition of what can be considered component, what cannot be considered component, it's pretty hard to define. So what I say is that any UI element in React Native is a component, right? Which you're gonna use it. And the thing about components is that in React, the design which is used, and by design I don't mean the aesthetic, but rather the implementation of component should be done in such a way that it's reusable. That is, I design a component today, and tomorrow someone else comes and they're able to use the same thing, right? So let's try to first create a component, and then on that component we'll be talking of the lifecycle methods, right? So you can see we have a fresh brand new React Native project. Let me do the usual cleanup. We don't need a bunch of things. Let me get rid of that. We don't need the styles, and we also don't need section. We don't need the type of section, and we're just gonna return a view. Okay, awesome, right? We have it. Now what I want to do is, let me also start a React Native server and let it build as well. Let me shrink down okay, we have a React Native project up and running. And just to confirm, if I put a text component with a hi, I can see that. Now let's say I want to create a button, and we want to create a button. We'll say text, and the text will be click me, and we'll give some styles. Style dot btn container. I'll say padding of 20 pixel, border radius of 4, background color green, and let's see how it looks. Okay, looks good. And I wanna have on press, and on press I wanna do a log that click me clicked, right? The name click me got clicked, right? Very weird, but yeah, that's what it is. Okay, that's great, right? Now for some reason I want to reuse this thing. I want one more button, right? So one approach is I just copy, right, And yeah, for your information, the way I did it was on Mac. If you select a piece of code and if you press Command Shift and if you put a down arrow, which I'll do, that piece of code will come down. If you click on up arrow, that piece of code will get copied up, right? So let me get rid of that. So coming back, see, the scenario is I want two buttons, right? So what I did, I just replicated this, right? Now this is okay, at least like for such a small application, no worries. But what if I already have like 300 lines? Okay, that's a really bad practice, but let's say I already have 300 lines of code. Now I'm adding so many more lines, right? So what I can do is I can create something called as component. So let me create a directory called as src. Inside src, I'll create a directory called as component, and inside component, I'll create a component which I'll call as custom button, and I'll say the extension is .tsx. Now if I do rnfes, I should get this thing. Now you'll be saying what magic was this, but this is no magic. It's actually, if you search React, if you on VS Code, if you search React, and if you see this extension, right, ES7 plus React Redux React Native, so it gives you snippet basically, right? So the snippet is RNFES, which essentially stands for React Native Function Export with Style. If I just do E, it will not give me style, right? But I need styles, right? So again, coming back to the custom component, what I'll do is I'll copy this whole thing and I'll bring it here. Obviously, I need to make imports. I will add to user setting for, and let me copy these styles as well. These styles are copied, and what I'll do here now is I'll remove it, and now you can see that I created this component, right? Now how can I access it in my main app component? The way we access any other component provided by React Native, the way we access view, the same way we are going to access custom button. You open a less than sign relative to whatever, right? And we just call the custom button, right? And you can immediately see this is there, right? Now if I have to reuse, I need to do this, right? But by reusing, it's not just shrinking the code. Reusing also means making it customizable, right? What if I don't want this click me to be always click me? What if on my will I can change it to something else, right? So let's take a typical example. Assume you are making a video player app, right? Player app. What buttons you can have? You can have play, you can have stop, right? Now both of them, in terms of dimension, in terms of layout, they are going to be same, but a play button will be a red color button and will have a play text. A stop button will have a red color background probably, and the text will be stop, right? So let's try to see that how can we achieve that customization. So you can see the text click me is coming because it's hard coded, right? So let's just get rid of that. And we were discussing a lot of things about props, right? That React Native provides us with bunch of props. So many props are there, right? Just the same way React Native provides us with props, we can create our own props. Now how do we create our own props? It's very straightforward, right? So let me just say title, and bear with me, don't worry about this error, title, and I'll say title is play, and for this the title is stop. Oh wow, did you see that? So the way we define props is pretty straightforward, right? If you see any component, right, the way we define component React Native, it is nothing but a function, right? So how this is, right? This is basically a function, an arrow function rather, I will say, and it receives an argument called as props. So if you do props dot title, you'll still see the same thing. And the other way is, instead of using props dot, you can directly destructure, right, title, and we can get rid of this, right? But there is a type error, right? And even though I didn't mention explicitly, but yeah, we are not going to write just plain JavaScript. We are going to write TypeScript, right? So let's create one more directory, which we'll call as, inside src, we'll call as models, and we'll have a interface.ts. What we'll say, export interface, and we are going to create an interface, and we are going to name it custom button, but we'll also follow some convention. We'll add a I. The reason we'll add I, because it's an interface. For an interface, we are going to add I, right? So what we are going to say is that it will have a, and let's also add I custom button props. My bad, I have a habit of saying it like this, I props custom button. What I'll do is I'll go and I'll say that this function is a react.fc, where fc stands for functional component. As I mentioned earlier, this is a functional component, right? And I'll say I props custom button. The moment I do that, you see that this error is gone, because I am now explicitly defining the type. Okay, that custom button is a React functional component, and its type is iProp custom button, right? Now, what if I go here and I remove this? It will immediately throw an error, show me an error, right? That, okay, you are missing some property. It will say to add these properties, right? So I can just make it anything, right? I can just say it resume, right? I can do anything, right? Okay, now let's also do bunch of things, right? We also want to change the color, right? So I'll say, let's not use title, let's use type, and we'll stick to our example of, we have a video player application. We'll say type. Okay, no, let's keep this title. Let's create one more prop called as type. Now title was of type string, but type, I want to create an enum. Now what is an enum? That's an interesting thing. So we can just say enum, and we'll say e, because it's an enum, e custom button type, and I'll say play is equal to play, and I'll also say stop is equal to stop is equal to stop, and I'll say this is this. Now the moment I do that, you can see there is error, because now we are saying that custom button is a React functional component of type iProps custom button, and if I put comma and if I do control space, I can see I have one more prop which I can access, that is the type, right? Now let's see what values type can be, right? So if I give some value play, it gives me an error, because it say that I don't recognize play as a type. If I say it is e custom, let me actually export this, it's not getting exported, e custom button dot type dot play, it will accept, right? Similarly for this, I'll change the type to stop, and also let me change this text to play, right? Now what I'll do is I'll say, now what I want to do is that based on this type I want to change the color, right? And now color I have defined here, right? So the problem is the styles object is outside this component, right? And hence it cannot access the variable type. So what to do? The other way of defining styles is that put it in an array, right? And leave the default one as it is. Now we can remove the background because we are conditionally gonna render background. And what I'll say is background color. So again, to reiterate, you can convert the styles from just objects to an array, and you can just pass the first element as the styles itself, the default style, and give a comma and create a new object, and this object will be of type styles only. So if you search background color, you'll see background color. And now what we'll say, type, now we'll say background color, and now it expects a value, right? It expects a value like black. But what we'll do is we'll add some condition. We'll say if type is equal to e custom button dot type dot play, if it is, if type is equal to this type, right, play, then I say green, else I'll say red. Did you see what just happened, right? So one single component, but just by props we are able to conditionally render things, right? So this is the power of creating reusable components and our own custom components, right? There are other aspects which has to be covered, but yeah, let's keep that for the next video. Thank you so much.